Welcome to the Pat White Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode number 9 of the Pat White Show. What we're covering today, well, in a nutshell, here it is. An update on the United Healthcare shooting in New York City. Joe pardons his son, Hunter. And how about this? Is China prepping for invasion of Taiwan? Going to talk about that. More companies are dropping DEI. I'll name the companies. Trump gives Hamas an ultimatum. Let's see what they do with that. Carlos Tavares decides to resign from Atlantis. And how about this? Swedish assassin kids under the age of 15? Wait to hear about this one. Dr. Facui issues another paper. Do you buy it? And how about this? Can Trump stop the Ukraine war? That's another big question. And finally, what about those drones flying over the Trump golf course in New Jersey? What's that all about? That and a whole lot more. Pat White Show starts right now. Well, what do you say we give you an update on the United Healthcare shooting that took place in mid-Manhattan, New York City, where Brian Thompson was gunned down by an assailant. Here's some of the new things we know. What we have determined is that the assailant, some pictures of his face have now been released. That's right, he went into a Starbucks, apparently ordered a coffee and a couple of energy bars, and his face has now been recognized. So instead of being covered, they've got a face to look at. That may help them a great deal. Secondarily, cartridges, empty casings from the pistol have words on them. Each one, deny, depose, and defend. Defend, rather. Each of those are on each cartridge. Now, beyond that, there was a book that came out some time ago that dealt with insurance companies and how they're treating their customers, and not very good. So this is not a nice book about insurance companies, frankly. It indicts insurance companies. Now, here's the deal. Mr. Thompson was in for the annual investors conference in New York City, so that you pretty well be able to find out. However, the gentleman who did the shooting, in the shooting case, he was able to get away, had a plan, worked to get out, but he didn't. He's not a professional assassin because having this picture out there, having things, they found a cell phone, they found a water bottle. And those are things they could get information from off the cell phone. It may be a burner phone, but they can still get information. Off the water bottle, DNA. Off the coffee cup, DNA. Now, they said that when he was shooting, he said his gun jammed. Looking at what's going on here, I don't think the gun jammed. I think he had the limp wrist going on. That's something that people shooting pistols understand. Because if your wrist is not rigidly set up, the recoil on that on the slide coming back on that pistol is going to cause that shell to, well, probably stovepipe. It happens. What you do in that case, you re-rack. And he did that, which tells me he's got a bit of training, because the way he was holding the pistol, the position of his feet, told me a whole bunch of stuff that was going on. Now, all that being said, apparently Mr. Thompson had been getting some death threats, according to his wife. He was also under SEC investigation for he and some of the other members of his organization had apparently dumped 101.5 million shares, so they're being investigated for insider trading. The United Healthcare is one of a group called Busco, and those are the 5 largest insurance companies in America, number 1 being Blue Cross, number 2 being United Healthcare. So what we know now is they have more evidence. They understand they've got a lot of stuff to go on. Will this gentleman be found who was doing this shooting? My guess is yes. Will they find him alive? I'm kind of wondering about that one, because now they know. Now he knows he's been made, and they will find him. And I think this has something to do with an insurance policy, an insurance turned down, or something involving the insurance market. And that may be related to the death threats that Mr. Thompson has been receiving. It's just a little something that makes this more and more interesting. Was it a regular assassin, professional type? No, I don't think so. Was it someone who is very disgruntled with his company? That seems to be becoming more and more evident. And will they find him? Yes, they will. And hopefully it doesn't end badly. But you never know in cases like this. Well, you probably heard over and over, Joe Biden was asked, are you going to pardon your son? He kept saying, nope, not going to do it. Going to let the chips fall where they may, let the government do what the government does. Well, Sunday, that all changed. Sunday, he put out an edict, a pardon, if you will, for his son that lasted not for just one offense, but for an unheard of time, 10 years. From 2014 to 2024, even for crimes that haven't even been discovered yet. Anything going on, anything he did inside that 10-year period, he is pardoned for. And that means he can't be connected to, Hunter can't be connected to his father in any of the dealings that were going on, and the father getting money. Because if you can't go after Hunter, you really can't go after his father unless you have substantial evidence. But, so what has happened is, this is the biggest pardon that Washington's ever seen. Now you're saying, well, wait a minute. Didn't Gerald Ford pardon Nixon? Yes, he did. He certainly did. And that pardon was from roughly 1969 to 1974 because during that time period, they were still putting people from the Nixon administration into prison. They were still doing that. They were going after various aides and what have you and putting a whole lot of them in jail. People like G. Gordon Liddy, that's the name I'll throw out for you. But never in the history of America has anyone been given a blanket pardon for 10 years, even though no crimes were shown. Well, other crimes that could occur, it's saying it doesn't matter what you find, you can't charge him. Historic, never been done. Now, why do that? Well, because Joe Biden probably figures out that if they go after Hunter, he's liable to say something and tell folks something, and he himself could be charged, even as a former president, understand. But family got very rich off of this in a lot of ways, taking money from a lot of places. You don't want that dirt out there, especially through your children. But this pardon, 10 years, wide, even the people that do the pardons said, you know, when Donald Trump was in office, he pardoned some people, but they were very specific. They said, for this thing on this date at this time, X person gets a pardon. It wasn't a blanket pardon. It covered everything and anything, some that's been brought up and some that hasn't. And then Biden said, well, it was a political witch hunt. Well, wait a minute. The ATF is the one who went after him for filing that false report. When you buy a weapon, you've got to fill out a form. I think it's 4473, some number like that, can't recall. You've got to fill that out. And if you do it wrong and you lie on that form, they're going to get you. ATF's going to come after you. I don't care who you are. And if you do tax fraud, the IRS is going to come after you. Now, who controls the IRS? Who controls the ATF? Who controls the Justice Department? And who controls the FBI? The executive branch. That's right. We have three stools of the government: executive, legislation, and judicial. Executive controls everything. If he wanted things done through the executive board, and we've already seen what the FBI has been doing, what the CIA has been doing, and what the Treasury Department's been doing, all under the direction of the president. And he's saying other political factions were doing this. I ain't buying it, folks, and I don't think you are. But what can you do? Nothing. He got away with it. He knows it. You know it. And I know it. What can be done? Nothing. Just saying. You know, one of the biggest things Americans should be concerned about is not Russia or Ukraine or one of the things that are happening in the Middle East, even in the Middle East with the Arab-Israeli war and those things going on. Biggest thing we should be concerned about, what's going on with China. China is becoming more powerful by the day. And one of the things they're looking at, whether anybody likes it or not, is going across the strait and attacking Taiwan, because they believe Taiwan belongs to them. But understand, Taiwan says they're their own country, and they don't want anything to do with China. Well, China doesn't see it that way. But China's got to figure out what happens if they were to attack Taiwan. And let me tell you what they're doing to figure that out. They are currently sending envoys to Russia, groups to Russia, to see how Russia is reacting to the restrictions that were put on it when it got involved with the war in Ukraine. What you don't realize is a lot of countries put restrictions on Russia, what they couldn't buy, what they couldn't get, because Russia's fighting with Ukraine. And so now what China's saying is, well, let's go take a look and see what happened to Russia when they attacked Ukraine, so we know what could happen to us if we decide to attack Taiwan. That's what they're doing, folks. They are sending committees, cadres, if you will, of people up to Russia to learn everything about every restriction that was put on Russia by the West. And they're saying, okay, let's see, can we live with this happening? Could we live with that happening? And then they said, let's find out how Russia's getting around some of this stuff for the people. Maybe they're working with other countries, other places that we can go to get the same stuff, but we know they're trying to learn this. So this is what is going on with China. China is trying to learn everything they possibly can from the Russians to figure out what's going to happen if they attack Taiwan. This is their goal. I don't care what you say. You can ask military people, they'll tell you exactly what's going on. China wants Taiwan because Taiwan makes a whole lot of chips. That's electronic chips used in computers. Chips are used in everything nowadays. You can't buy a car that's not run by a computer. Hell, you get an air freshener and that's run by a computer. Chips are coming from places like, Taiwan. If China can get their hands on that, they can control a whole lot of stuff going on in the United States or stop stuff going on from the United States involving computer chips and bring America to a screeching halt. So they're investigating what happened to Russia because of Ukraine and how they can get around any of those sanctions that are put on them. Just thought I would pass that along to you because nobody seems to want to talk about this, but I'll tell you what. Anybody who knows in the military and understands what the wartime situation is, right now you don't need to worry about Europe. They got their own problems. You don't need to worry about Russia because they got bigger problems. You got to worry about China. They want Taiwan, and how they're going to get it is determining as to what the United States is going to do and what we are willing to sacrifice. Just telling you all the ins and outs. You may not like it, but that's what's going on, folks. Let's see what Donald Trump can do with that particular problem, because that's one he's going to be facing, right off the gate. Just saying. That's all I got. Well, recently I told you that Walmart, one of the biggest companies in the United States, got like 1.8 million workers, employees, if you will, has decided they're no longer going to follow the DEI concept. They decided to let it DIE, die. Now, Walmart says, hey, we're not going to keep doing this. We're going to get out of the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index, which they said, nah, we ain't going to keep doing that. That ain't going to work. And they've also said, we are going to quit using the term Latinx, a general neutral term to refer to Latin people. They're going to say, no, that ain't working either. So Walmart said, look, we're done with this DEI stuff. But who else is quitting? Turns out some more that you may not realize. Molson Coors. Yeah, I'm a Coors fan, was back in the old days. Well, they've said, hey, DEI ain't working. We're going to quit this. It just, it doesn't fit the company image, so we're getting out of the DEI. And they're also ending their participation in the HRC Corporate Equality Index as well as Walmart did. They said, nah, not going to be doing that. But another big company, Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company has decided they no longer want to be involved with the DEI mentality, the HRC Corporate Equality Index. Once again, that's the big fancy word they came up for DEI, and they're saying, nah, it don't work. It's not helping us in recruiting. It's going to create bigger problems, and it's destroying the morality within the company or the people's attitude within the Ford Motor Company. So it's not working. So now Ford Motor Company has said, no, DEI, bad plan. Now, speaking of vehicles, Harley-Davidson. Now, Harley-Davidson is not a big company, but they're dropping DEI like a lot of the other companies are doing. And then, frankly, they said, look, we make motorcycles. That's what we do. That's what we sell to people. But, we don't want to keep doing this. And take a look at this one here. Lowe's Home Improvement Center. They have decided they're getting out of the DEI business themselves. They followed Ford Motor Company, followed Walmart, and they said, hey, we are not going to participate in this human rights campaign mess. And all the companies have said the same identical thing because they realize they're being told what to do, how to do it, who to hire, and who they can't hire. And because of that, they're not getting the people they want to have working in their company. They're told, well, you must take this person because of what? Their gender, their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, whatever. They're all saying, no, it doesn't work. The concept is bad. It's taken a while for them to figure it out. And are the other companies going to be doing that? You betcha. But the bigger companies have learned, and even the smaller companies like Harley-Davidson, saying, hey, this concept is bad. And it all generates from what happened in the Floyd incident a few years ago up in Minneapolis. Well, now people are realizing this HRC situation, this is a bad idea all the way around. And they don't want to do it, and they're now saying, we are done with it, we're finished with it, and frankly, DEI is a bad concept and was from the very beginning, and now they're being willing to say it. So, are more companies going to be dropping this policy? You betcha. Will they talk about it? Some may not. But now you know what's going on. Maybe America is starting to get its head on and figures out this is what we have to do to maintain our quality of life. Well, as you know, the mess that's been going on in Palestine, which is a country right next to Israel, and it's created Hamas. This all goes back to the slaughter that was done on the Israeli people back in October of last year. And about 250 prisoners were taken supposedly by the Hamas, taken back into Palestine. They've been hiding them. Many are dead. They figure there's around maybe 100 left still alive. And nobody's been able to get the hostages out. There have been negotiations, trying to get peace things done, a treaty done, get this person released, get that person released. I think thus far, most people have still been held hostage for over 1 year. Over a year. And nothing's been done. Well, as you know, Donald Trump was reelected back into office. Number 47 will happen in January 20th. Well, I want to take you back in history for a little bit, because I want to tell you about something that happened that kind of close to the same thing. Back in 1979, militants in Iran attacked the U.S. Embassy and took hundreds of people hostage. Inside the U.S. Embassy, our ground, our property, our country, if you will, attacked the embassy and took out these hostages. And they sat there for, 444 days. The latter part of the Jimmy Carter administration back in 79. And when the election happened, turns out Ronald Reagan was elected president. Well, here's what happened behind the scenes before Reagan took office. Reagan sent word to the folks over in Iran, those holding all the hostages, that, hey, you don't release those hostages, the moment I'm sworn in, I'm going to turn your country into glass. And the hostage takers over in Iran went, I think he's serious. He's that kind of guy. So the day that he was sworn in, the hostages were released because he called their bluff. That was 1980, okay? 1980. Keep that in mind. Well, here's what just happened. Donald Trump just sent out word to the Hamas people in Palestine. He said, look, here's the deal. I want those hostages released, and if they aren't released by January 20th when I take offer, there is going to be hell to pay. You understand what he said? Donald Trump said to Hamas, you don't release them by January 20th, there's going to be hell to pay. And they kind of know, well, Trump's been in office before. They know what he's done, and they've got to figure out, I think he's going to do it. He could do it. He's crazy enough to do it. Don't know what he can do, but I'll tell you what, he can make life really bad. So here's now what's going to happen. The Hamas people with those hostages got to decide what they're going to do. They're going to find peace. They're going to make a peace thing. They're going to send to the hostage. That's the only thing they got left. They got nothing else. But Trump has told them in no uncertain terms, you release the hostages by January the 20th, or there will be hell to pay. I think he means it. Let's see what the folks in the Hamas group decide to do, realizing it's happened before with Reagan, 1980. Could it happen again? We are about to find out. So now you know what just happened, and let's see what Hamas decides to do. Somebody's going to blink, and I think I know who's it going to be. Well, if you have been following what I've been talking about in recent weeks, there's a big problem going on in the U.S. car market. And that problem is dealing with one group of cars, the Chrysler group. Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, and even Jeep, because that falls under the same umbrella of Stellantis. Stellantis is the big international company that owns car dealerships or car manufacturing in Europe, big names, and they purchased the whole mess in the United States. And that was headed up by a gentleman by the name of Carlo Tavares. Now, the concern is Tavares has been trying to figure out what to do in America because the sales of their vehicle line here in the United States has dropped dramatically. Chrysler down, Dodge down, Jeep down. These dealers are saying, hey, we got inventory we can't sell. Nobody wants to touch it because the products aren't good. And not only that, they've got themselves a big problem with the United Auto Workers. They have demands. Well, what's going to happen now that Carlos Tavares, he was scheduled to retire next year, in 2026. He has abruptly resigned, and I mean abruptly. Something's going on, folks. I've been talking about this for a while. Here's what I'm thinking. With all that problem they have, apparently the Stellantis group is looking for some way to unload the American car manufacturers, the Chryslers, the Dodge, the Jeeps, unload that because it's a big drain on their company. Their sales are down 40%. Now, you got to figure out, GM sales are up 50%, Ford sales are down 7%, but Stellantis Chrysler line is down 40%. They're in a big hole. They're looking to get rid of it. So, who do you think is going to end up buying the Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram business from Stellantis? Well, the word here is that maybe, and it's a pretty good maybe, the Chinese may buy it. You heard me right. If China buys up that particular dealership, that means they will be able to produce cars in the United States, no tariffs, and introduce whatever other cars they want to into the system. Because Trump was talking about, putting a high tariff on things coming from China or things coming from Mexico, and he'll push it hard and he means it. But if Stellantis is purchased by the Chinese, which they could do, then all bets are off. Everything changes. So now you understand. If you happen to be a dealer of Jeep or Dodge or Chrysler, well, keep an eye out, folks, because your business, your company, your car dealerships and your manufacturers and all the employees who work for those companies could be paying homage to the Chinese, who could be coming in and purchase the entire kit and caboodle from Stellantis and get it off of their books, which is exactly what they're looking for. Someone to come in and be an angel and take the mess off of their hands and figure out a way to make it profitable. And if you're China, avoid tariffs. That's what's going on, folks. Now you know. Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram, folks, you got a big problem. Let's see what happens in the coming days, weeks, and months and see exactly what happens about who owns whom, and that's coming up very soon. Wait and see. It's coming. Well, allow me to tell you a little story about a young man. His name is Fernando. Now, Fernando's only 14 years of age, and hey, kids of that age, what do they like to do? Sit around, play video games. Just be kids, right? Well, except Fernando gets a text message on his cell phone, because he has a cell phone, and on that text message, he is told to go to a location, pick up a couple of Glock pistols and a Kalashnikov rifle, and take those to another location with his assistant, and go to a location and kill somebody. That's what you heard right. And not only that, Fernando was so good that he videotapes on his phone, like people do, hold up the phone, videotapes the assassination, shooting through the door of an apartment complex. And when he's all done, Fernando sends the video to the person who sent him the original text, who happens to be in another country, by the way. And Fernando is given a reward of $15,000. You see, Fernando is 14 years old and he's an assassin. Now, Fernando's not here in the United States. Fernando's in Sweden. Because Sweden has a law that says anybody under the age of 15 cannot be prosecuted for a crime. Yeah, you heard me right. Sweden has a law that says anybody under 15 can't be prosecuted for a crime. They're too young. So the drug war is going on in Sweden. There's two particular groups that are out there fighting, and they each have their own assassins, but they have figured out, let's use kids under the age of 15. They can't be prosecuted. They like the money. They get the money. They go out and buy more video games, whatever, and we're scot-free. That's what's going on. Now, in Sweden, in the European Union, okay, let's use that, assassinations, gun violence in the EU has exploded over the past year. They say, well, there aren't any guns in the European Union. Yeah, there are. Figures rose from 31 counts in the first 8 months of 2023 to 102 for the same period of this year. And most of these are assassinations done by kids under the age of 15 because they can't be prosecuted. Now, Fernando is an immigrant to Sweden. He's not a native-born Swedish kid. He's an immigrant. And he said, hey, got a job to do? I'm going to go do it. Because the drug lords are paying him. The two drug gangs fighting against each other for turf, they have their own assassins. Now, is that possible we can see that in the United States of America? Let me ask you that. Is it possible? Well, we can't prosecute kids under certain ages. They go to juvie home, whatever, for a period of time. But would we see assassins under that age getting guns provided by gangs? You don't like it, folks, but it can happen. Tren de Agua, the Venezuelan gang, they would do that in a heartbeat. The MS-13, they would do it in a heartbeat. Hasn't happened yet. But I'm just trying to tell you, it's going on in Europe. It's going on in Sweden because they know using young kids, the young kids can get away with it, and the young kids don't care. They film the assassination, send it to their bosses. Here you go, boss, pay me the money. 14-year-old kid with $25,000, that's living large, folks. That's what we're dealing with. You're not worried about it? Hey, America, things can happen. And with these gangs in the United States, bad things can happen faster than you will ever believe. Just telling you, just so you know, and you have been warned. Well, I'm guessing you all remember COVID-19. Like, who could ever forget COVID-19? Well, guess what has now just cropped up on the horizon? A new scientific paper from Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, some of you may not remember who that was, but he was the lead COVID guy in the White House some years back, ultimately retired out of government, making a whole lot of money, by the way, and he has now written a new paper. And the paper is very critical of the Trump administration because he said with COVID-19, the role of political leadership at the highest level, or the lack thereof, was again shown to be crucial. That's what he wrote. As COVID-19 exploded globally and in the United States, President Donald Trump frequently minimized the seriousness of the pandemic, repeatedly claiming that COVID-19 will just go away. And in the first full year of the pandemic, 2020, the last year of his presidency, he failed to use his bully pulpit to encourage people to use available low-tech tools such as masks, respirators, better ventilation, and physical distancing to reduce the risk of infection, unquote. That's Dr. Fauci's new paper. A whole lot of that stuff has been debunked, folks. Even the stuff on the 6-foot distancing, the scientists say, we don't know where the hell that came from. Now, Fauci went on to say that Trump was promoting things like hydrochloroquine and a drug called ivermectin. And he said that many opportunities were missed for political leadership in promoting policies and practices to mitigate the impact of the raging pandemic. But here's the part. Here's what he said in his paper. Hey, a bunch of scientists are all saying the virus came from an animal reservoir and it transferred over to humans at a Hunan marketplace and spread throughout China and the rest of the world. Nowhere does he mention anything in there involving the lab in China that was being funded by the World Health Organization, among others. Doesn't even mention that one area. He says, no, it came from animals. Trouble is, that's been debunked too. But here's something to understand about all these scientists he's talking about. Remember, folks, scientists will always agree with whomever is funding them. As a rule, scientists will always recommend and stay behind whomever is funding them. If you understand that, then you understand exactly how things work in the world of science, at least in the world of Dr. Anthony Fauci in his latest paper. If you agree with it, you're called. I'll bet you a whole lot of folks are going, what? What on earth? Because it sounds like the rantings of someone trying to cover their bases in hopes that nothing gets out that would make them look a lot worse than it certainly turns out to be. Just saying. That's all I got for you. Back in the 1980s, Russia was actually fighting in Afghanistan. A lot of folks don't remember that, but they were. It was sort of like what we were doing fighting in Afghanistan. Neither one of us, frankly, won. Well, Russia suffered 7,500 deaths in the fighting in Afghanistan. And so they ultimately pulled out and said, no, this ain't worth it. So what happened was all the people in Russia went back and they started drinking because that's what they do in Russia. They drink a lot. I mean, a whole lot more than you would possibly imagine, because the number of people dying of cirrhosis of the liver and those kind of ailments tied to alcohol has shot up in Russia to a massive level. And I mean, it is big time. It's really gotten bad. Now, here's the reason. The price of a liter of vodka in Russia is about $2.20. You heard me right, about $2.20 for a liter of vodka. And brandy, people drink that too. The deaths are amazing. Well, all right, here's the deal. So, in the Afghan war, like I said in 1980, there ultimately were 15,000 killed when you add everything up and what happens from the Afghan thing. So there was 7,500, then it went up to 15,000. So ultimately, let's say they had 15,000 killed in Afghanistan. But let's compare it to now. Russia's in a war now with Ukraine. From February 24th, 2022 until November 19th of 2024, so that's about a little over 2 years, 120,000 Russians have been killed in the fighting in Ukraine. 120,000. You've got people, young men, deserting Russia to get out because they don't want to get drafted. The drinking has gotten worse. And a governor in a province north of Moscow, he has limited the amount of time during a day that people can buy alcohol to 2 hours. Yep. Now, surprisingly enough, in Chechnya, where they have limited the amount of drinking that goes on drastically, The birth rate in Chechnya has gone up 1.5 to 2 times the size of the population. It's gone up dramatically. In Russia, it's going down. So all these things are going bad. The ruble in Russia is basically worthless. People in Russia can't buy anything outside of Russia because there's a restriction on it. They have to buy only things in Russia, and most of that stuff is garbage. Their interest rate in Russia has climbed up to 21%. So Donald Trump is saying, hey, I can go to Vladimir and say, hey, you got to quit this thing. He's in good, strong hands at that point because right now that Russia is in very, very bad shape. Now, what will happen in Ukraine? My guess is it'll probably be a demarcation line set up. Russia will be able to have a certain amount of territory on one side and the Ukrainians on the other side, and they'll be like in the Korean War, where they have the 38th parallel, which is the line that separates the north and the south. Probably something like that's going to happen in the Ukraine. Russia wants this thing over, and Donald Trump is going to go in there and say, hey, it's got to be over now. Because if he cuts off the sales of weapons to Ukraine, well, the military-industrial complex, getting all this money spent, not going to be happy. But Vladimir is looking for a way to get out of this mess because Russia is turning on him. And he wants to keep people, well, let them stay in office before they revolt and, do what they did in the Russian Revolution back in the early 1900s. So there's where it stands right now. Big alcohol problem in Russia. A liter of vodka, $2.20. You can't get that here in America, I can guarantee you. But the level of alcohol problems is massive. They're looking for some way to get out. And Donald Trump says he can end the war, and tell you what, I believe he can, because Putin wants out in the worst way. And this is going to give him the opportunity to stop the entire mess. Let's see what happens. Well, have you heard the story about the drones flying in north part of New Jersey near Donald Trump's Bedminster Golf Club? Well, apparently it's been going on for a while, dating back to the early part of December, the 1st and 3rd of December, and even back into late November. People have reported drones that are flying over people's property. And there are people saying, what the heck is going on here? Why are these drones flying? Well, we have a problem with drones that exist in this country. Everybody wants to own a drone, putting them up in the sky. Many people use them for photography. We've got a person here in our city that shoots some great visuals of places like Parkview Field and the city itself and downtown by using drones, and he's very good at it. His photographs are really quite exceptional. All right, so some people use it for special professional things. Realtors use it now a whole lot to do properties for the marketing of the properties. All right, I understand that. But drones are becoming a bit of a problem, especially for the FAA. You see, they're responsible for what's going on in the skies. And what they've done at the Trump property is put a temporary restricted flight zone over that area, saying you can't be flying over that area. But people say, well, why are these drones there? Well, now the FBI is taking a look into it to figure out what's going on. Some people are saying, well, these are, foreign things. Maybe they're unidentified flying objects. No, they're not. They're drones. If you take a look at them flying, they've got colored lights, red, green, blue, white, whatever. And they have the lights on because that's what drones do to make sure the people flying in the skies don't hit them. Well, unfortunately, you can't really see them, and so you're probably going to hit them. One day, someone's going to do that. But the point being is, the drones exist, and for whatever reason, if someone wants to bring them down, and now the FBI is getting involved, there is a way of bringing down these drones. If you haven't seen it done, it looks like something out of Star Wars. It looks like some sort of Star Wars rifle they aim at the drone. And what it does is it interferes with the signal that's being transmitted to the drone that allows it to fly and move left and right, whatever drones do. You take away that ability to intercept that signal, and there's no signal controlling the drone is going to go, I'm going to land. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to land, and that's what happens. So if they want to take these drones down and figure out what's going on, they've got the equipment to do it. Whether they do it or not, well, that's strictly their call. But yes, the drones exist, and there are probably people out doing all kinds of things, some good, some bad. but making a big thing about it, I don't know. But the FAA is concerned, and now so is the FBI. So let's wait and see what they find.